Alto session. So today it's going to be a very brief introduction about what really Palo Alto is, the content that we'll be covering, and I'll be starting off with some of the basics of cybersecurity, those sort of things. Okay. So this will kind of give you an opportunity to understand what we are going to do. Um, a little bit of introduction about myself before we start. So my name is Arun, and I have around 15 years of industry experience. So I've primarily worked on the security side of things. So I've experience with Palo Alto, Fortinet, done a bit of Sophos, Cisco as well, hold numerous certifications with respect to security in general. So before we start, I just wanted to, have a quick round of question for everyone. What sort of an experience people here have with respect to security or maybe firewalls in general, or maybe Palo Alto, for example? Are there new folks here who are, just starting with security really, or people have worked with Palo Alto before, don't know anything about Palo Alto, want to learn Palo Alto, want to learn security? What sort of folks we have here? Just a quick question for everyone. If everyone can go ahead, give you 5 minutes, just um, share your opinions, share your understanding about the
Hi,
industry.
hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, myself Akash Kumar. Uh, uh, Basically, I have to learn networking, and previously I have done my CCNA. So we know how to create a network, all those things how network works, but we don't know about the security, how to
Okay.
secure a particular network like or PC, and when you're talking about a network, so uh, we don't know about the basic of the security, how to secure a network. So why so that's why I am there to learn
Okay.
the Palo Alto Firewall. So
Okay. Very well. Anyone else would like to?
I am
Yeah,
also
Pankaj this
working.
side.
Please, Pankaj, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I am also new for the security platform and the uh, working in the transmission domain currently.
Okay.
Yes.
Morning,
Hi,
folks. How you going?
hi,
Yes, morning.
Aman here. Morning. I also have no idea about these firewalls. Actually, I have enrolled in that not network masters program with networkings.
hmm
So, and they're teaching us CCNA at the moment. So, I don't know. I just got this mail to join this webinar, so I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Oren. How you going? Hi, everyone.
Hey, yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Well, my name is Mohammed Hassan. So I'm actually have a bit of an experience about security, but not like firewall type thingy. It's a bit of a like upper level. So I worked as an endpoint security engineer, you could say so. Is actually implementing 802.1x and the MAP, which is a MAC bypass.
So have you worked with ICE?
Yes, it's DNAC, CP, and a bit of a SolarWinds. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
nice.
not
Okay,
much
so
deep
so I'm not.
experience. Yeah, but bit of an overview you can say so. But yeah, a bit of an idea like how it works and stuff like that. But yeah, so I haven't had any opportunity to learn about the firewalls and stuff. And I was thinking like that's gonna be pretty much the fundamental thing to know before deep down onto the security and stuff. So that's why I'm here.
All right, awesome.
Cool.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi, myself Vijay. Actually, I don't have any knowledge on security. I have knowledge on CCNA, that routing and switching. That's why I need to learn about security from scratch to expert level. That's why I have joined this course.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, guys. So yeah, so I think for the majority of us here, all have some sort of a networking experience, really, at least at a CCN level. That's really what I would really expect, at least, okay, as a prerequisite for everyone to at least know the CCNA level of knowledge, at least have that in place. And then from the security aspect, that's absolutely fine. Folks are just trying to, get into security. So that's what really would be our focus for at least starting couple of sessions, okay, to give you a very brief overview about, what cybersecurity, what's InfoSec, some of the terms that you might have heard out in the wild, but never really could comprehend what they might really mean. And then obviously we will be spending a lot of time around the next generation firewall piece, specifically from the Palo Alto side. Okay. And then as a comparison piece, I'll also from time to time go ahead and talk about, comparisons with respect to how things compare with something like Fortinet or something like Sophos maybe, or from something like Cisco firewalls. Okay. So kind of will have an idea of what Palo Alto is, how it's better, how it's not good against, a lot of these competitors.
Hey Arun, sorry to disturb you. I do not
Yes,
have
please.
any kind of knowledge regarding this one, firewalls or CCNA. I'm completely from this one, non-networking background.
Okay.
I do have 10 years of experience where we manage data center in that switches and servers and storage part. I'm primarily working on Brocade and Cisco switches where we allocate, storage and configuration and zoning part in the SAN side, and we allocate LUNs to the servers from the storage array side. I don't have any CCNA or any other networking stuff.
That's
So
fine. So as long as you have been working with switches, no matter what vendor it is, okay? I mean, I expect you to know how packets work, right? How at least ARP works, right? How DHCP works, right? What is an OSI model or what is a TCP IP model, right? So that's really what CCNA is, right? So CCNA, so using the term CCNA, don't really expect you to have a certification, but at least that knowledge, at least you should know the basics of networking. That's really what I mean when I say CCNA level knowledge. Okay, so since you have been working in the data center, you have been working with switches, Brocade, Cisco, whatever. I'm pretty sure you have that much knowledge to comprehend where firewalls come in and how do firewalls help in the environment. All right, so don't worry about that. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyone else would like to go ahead, or I could probably start with the.
Yeah, please proceed with.
All right. Okay. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, hope everyone can see the screen and can see the.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. So this is just to highlight what all we'll be covering from the Palo Alto Firewall side of things. Okay, and like you see at the very top, I have highlighted the prerequisites, right? You can ignore the CCNP bit. Okay, so if you have advanced networking knowledge, that's great. If not, that's okay as well. Okay, so but at least basics of CCNA, at least, right? IP addressing, etc., etc. You should know how routing works, how switching works. Okay, what NAT is, how do we use it, etc. Intended for obviously admins, support engineers, security engineers, people who might be trying to come into security. Okay, getting introduced to the security side of things. Obviously, firewall is at the very foundation, at the very basic of security. Okay, every environment will have some form of firewall in place, be it on-premise, be it in the organization, or nowadays when we discuss cloud. Okay, so firewalls are needed. Firewalls are deployed in the cloud as well. Okay, so firewalls at its very basic level, they are required. Now, the content from the Palo Alto Firewall perspective, obviously, we'll try and cover as much as possible to give you as much knowledge about firewalls in general, as well as Palo Alto, how Palo Alto firewalls work. So we'll be discussing the architecture for the Palo Alto firewall from a hardware software architecture perspective. How does a packet move through the various processes, various features, various engines through the Palo Alto firewall? Okay. Then obviously, since it is a firewall training session, it is going to be mostly on the hands-on side. Okay, so we'll be doing a lot of labs, etc. Okay, so we'll be looking at how do you do initial configuration for a new Palo Alto firewall? How do you initialize it? How do you do the day zero configuration? Or you can call it a bootstrapping of the device. How do you do the configuration? How does management work for that? We'll discuss the licensing pieces. How do the updates work within a firewall? Maybe looking at account administration. What are the different ways in which a firewall can be administered? Different types of roles can be configured. Different sort of privileges, what can be given to admins and what and how each of those differ. Okay, so we'll be looking at the admin roles and everything. From a firewall's perspective, we'll be looking at security zones. Okay, very important concept from a firewall perspective, zones. So we'll be looking at configuring zones, configuring SVIs. I'm pretty sure CCNA level, everyone knows why do we need sub interfaces? Why would you configure sub interfaces, etc. So we'll be discussing that. Different types of modes of deployment, how we can in different ways deploy the firewall. Okay, you have tap mode, virtual wire, layer 2, layer 3. Okay, so folks new to the firewall side of thing, you might not know right now what tap mode is or what virtual wire is, but I'm pretty sure everyone would understand what layer 2 and layer 3 is. Okay. Looking at some of the other basic configurations from a appliance, from a device perspective, looking at how you configure DHCP to provide IP addresses for your LAN devices, LAN users. How do you do routing? Okay, within routing, what really are virtual routers? How you can do multi-virtual routers? How do you do configuration for that? And then once we have covered the basics of the firewall as an appliance, and then there are additional things that we will set up, we'll configure as we go through in the lab. Okay. Once we have discussed the basics of the firewall, the appliance, will then look at the security aspect of the firewall. How do you configure policies? Okay, policy configuration. How do you do NAT? How do you do static NAT? How do you do destination NAT? How do you do UNAT? Okay, so different forms of NAT that we can do. The NAT concept really is the same, whether you talk about a data center device, whether you talk about a router, maybe a layer 3 switch. NAT is NAT, right? So I'm pretty sure everyone understands what source NAT is, what destination NAT is. We'll just see how Palo Alto firewalls do NATing, which is a little different from a concept perspective. Okay, the end result is the same. It's going to change a private IP address to a public IP address before the packet is routed out to the internet. That's really the basic of NAT. Okay, now how does Palo Alto does it? That's what we will need to understand from an architecture perspective, from a functionality perspective. And then obviously, how do you do the configuration to support NATing? From the firewall's perspective, we'll be then looking at how we can do application visibility, how we can have the firewall look for applications and differentiate between applications. Okay, so for example, if a user is trying to access Facebook versus if he's trying to access something like YouTube. Okay, so my firewalls should be able to distinguish between that traffic based upon application. That's what we can call that as application visibility. Okay, which typically cannot be done by something like layer 3 routers or switches or even data center devices. Okay, since they operate only up until layer 4. Okay, so with the firewalls, we also have up to layer 7 visibility, which is the application layer. Okay, so that's what the app ID feature is within the firewall. Next, we'll be looking at content ID. This is where we will be implementing next generation security features. Things like antivirus, anti-spyware, detecting vulnerability, doing URL filtering. Okay, so we'll be discussing how URL filtering works, what sort of a databases are required. File blocking. How can the firewall recognize different file types? Okay, and take some action on it. Then there is something that we call as wildfire. This is to stop day 0 attacks. Okay, so again, some of the terms you might not, folks new to security might not understand right off the bat, but I'll be discussing that, what day 0 is, what vulnerability is, what threat is, what an exploit is. So these are all the terms I'll give you the information about. We'll discuss them. Okay, so wildfire, to protect against day 0 attacks. By that I mean, at a very basic level, it means new viruses, okay, which no one has ever seen, no one is aware about. Okay, so the firewall can act upon and can recognize such traffic as well. Additional things, decryption, TLS decryption, we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at how we can manage certificates within the firewall. Then we'll also discuss user ID. Okay, just like I discussed application visibility, there is also user visibility as well. Okay, so I can create different policies based upon different types of user groups. Maybe I want to give access to Facebook, but to only the users in my environment, which may be belonging to the sales group or maybe belonging to the marketing department only. Okay, and I want to block Facebook for everyone else in the environment. Okay, so that user visibility, that user-based access, I can provide through something like user ID. Okay. We'll be discussing VPN, obviously, a very important aspect with respect to firewalls or security in general. Okay, so anywhere you have security, anywhere we talk about tunnels, okay, you would have VPN, primarily IPsec. Okay, so if you go on the enterprise side, if you do something like SD-WAN, there is IPsec there as well. If you do site-to-site VPN, there is IPsec there. If you do remote access VPN, there is again a VPN tunnel. Okay, so IPsec is very important. Okay, and once you understand IPsec and once you understand VPN, you basically understand VPN for everything, for every vendor. Okay, because IPsec is really a vendor agnostic, a vendor neutral framework, really. Okay, so we'll spend some time on there, see how you can do the VPN on the Palo Alto side as well. Within Palo Alto, there is Global Protect as well, okay, which is basically you being able to do remote access VPN, okay, for your remote workers, your remote users, or your remote workforce. Okay, so we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at how do you do reports, how do logs work within a firewall, how you can use those to do troubleshooting, how you can do those to pull information, to look at information about the traffic that is flowing through the firewall. Okay, and I've also added the T-should section at the bottom here as well. How do you take packet capture? How you can take the packet capture through the CLI? Okay, how you can troubleshoot the management plane and the data plane, really. Okay, again, management plane is how you configure the firewall. Data plane is the traffic flow, the input-output devices, the input-output interfaces, the data interfaces through which the traffic flows. Okay, so we'll see how that differentiation is in Palo Alto firewalls and how you can do troubleshooting. Again, both from the web page as well as from the CLI. And then there is high availability as well. Okay, obviously we typically organizations will have multiple firewalls rather than having a single firewall. Okay, so if there's a single firewall, if that firewall goes down, then that will cause a network outage. All of your traffic will stop to flow. Okay, so from a redundancy perspective, typically organizations implement at least 2 firewalls in either an active-active fashion or an active-passive fashion. Okay, so we'll see how that works, what the concept is behind high availability, etc. And then we will end this with an overview of Panorama. Okay, and Panorama is a centralized management platform for Palo Alto firewalls. Okay, so if an organization, let's say for example, has 1, 2, maybe 5 firewalls, okay, you can manage each one of them individually. But what if I have 100 firewalls? Or maybe I have, let's say, 50 firewalls or even 20 firewalls. It becomes very difficult for me to manage each of those firewalls individually. Okay, so in that case, I can basically register all of those firewalls to a centralized server, which in this case is called Panorama. Okay, and then I can create my policies in just Panorama, and then I can push those policies to the firewalls. Okay, maybe I have 5 firewalls in Asia. I have 10 firewalls in North America. Okay, I have another 20 firewalls in Europe, and I want to have different policies based on regions. I can do it through Panorama. Okay, so I can create one policy for all the firewalls in Asia, for all the firewalls in North America, for all the firewalls in Europe, and then I can push that policy to all the firewalls in that particular region. Okay, so that region segregation, that policy segregation, that policy configuration, all of that can be done from the Panorama. Okay, so it gives us that centralized management ability as well. And then any logs that we want to see, any sort of troubleshooting that we want to do, we can do it right from the Panorama rather than going in and logging into individual firewalls. Okay. So that's going to be the outline of what all we will be covering with respect to Palo Alto. Okay. Another thing about and obviously you'll have lab for it. The only thing with Palo Alto firewalls in the lab is, and I'm going to call it right now, is you basically get a very restricted access to the Palo Alto firewalls in general. Okay, until and unless you license them. Okay, so what all you see here, we will be able to do around 60 to 70% of what I have highlighted here in the lab. Okay, rest 30-40% is something that we will discuss. I'll go over. Maybe I'll show you through screenshots what it looks like. Okay, but we won't be actually be able to do hands-on for it because again, it's restricted. Okay, and Palo Alto restricts it. Okay, so without the licenses, there are a lot of features which you cannot do in the lab. And obviously, Palo Alto licensing is not cheap. Okay, so in the lab, there are evaluation virtual machines, okay, which still can do now a lot of things which previously were not possible at all, but there are still things which you cannot do. For example, Global Protect, okay, or for example, Panorama. Okay, but for these things, I'll at least go over and talk about some of these things, discuss what it is. Maybe if I can get some screenshots, I can have some screenshots and show you how things really look like.
So Arun, can we? You guys will teach about Prisma as well, Palo Alto Prisma, or
Prisma, I can discuss
okay,
what Prisma is, but this is primarily Strata.
okay,
Okay. So again, for people here who don't know what the difference is, Strata is Palo Alto's on-premise devices, which includes firewall, and Prisma is Palo Alto's cloud-based solutions,
okay,
right? So Prisma includes things like SD-WAN, okay, or some of the other things, okay. So when we'll start to discuss the Palo Alto side of things, I'll discuss the difference between Prisma, Strata, Cortex, for example. Okay, what are the different solutions in there? This is going to be primarily focusing on the Strata
okay,
side
sure,
of things, which is their firewalls. Okay.
okay, okay.
Arun, like one thing, is there any cost, like in order to access the panorama, like we should do it to the networking side, or like how it is, like we should personally do?
So just as an example, so one panorama license, if I talk about not taking it from Palo Alto itself, okay, if someone is generous enough to give you a license, one license of Panorama costs around 35,000 rupees.
Okay.
So Arun, what we
Okay.
can do, like in previously we delivered a one official Palo Alto training where we take we buy a Palo Alto license including Panorama. So guys, for the reference, we are gonna give you that videos so that if in case somewhere you're stuck, you'll be able to see the videos for that pattern. Only GP like a global product and Panorama lab is not there. Rest all is there.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'll give you that particular batch video where we delivered entirely like with the license.
So we don't get
Quick question
hands-on, is
here.
it?
Sorry. Anup, go
We
ahead.
don't get hands-on lab, is it? Only we have to see the video.
No, it's the hands-on labs is there. Only there are two topics that cannot be covered without the licensing. That is GP, global product, and the panorama. Rest all is covered.
Arun, quick question regarding the panorama again.
Yes, please.
Now, as we are chasing here for the PCNSA exam, so whatever questions coming out from that part of this chapter, will it be covered by your
Correct.
teaching material?
Yep. So just for reference, PCNSA does not, or Palo Alto does not expect you to know Panorama from PCNSA perspective. Okay. If you go into the PCNSE, which is the next level, okay, that's where they expect you to know Panorama.
Right.
Really.
Okay. And how much percentage of the question will be covered by the panorama or will come from the panorama from your experience?
I don't really remember at the top of my head, but I think it's about 10 to 15% of the total blueprint for
And that will be
PCNSE.
covered by your course material, I believe. Yeah.
Yes. So the ones that the other gentleman was mentioning, that they will provide you the videos, that basically is where you will be able to do Panorama. Okay. Plus, one thing that I can recommend, if there are people here who maybe have Panorama in their environment, or maybe they use Palo Alto in their environment, you can reach out to your accounts manager or to your SE, and they can hook you up with evaluation licenses.
So when you say the account manager, you're talking about the network's kings?
No, the Palo Alto account manager.
I'm sorry, I just need to be confirmed about a bit of a question. I'm confused about. So when you say Palo Alto account manager, is someone from the background
Palo Alto. Someone from Palo Alto, right? So if you purchased Palo Alto equipment,
right,
to use in your environment, right? So you would have some sort of an SE, some sort of a partner, or some sort of account manager from Palo Alto assigned to your account.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So something similar that you have on maybe Fortinet side or maybe Cisco side. Okay. So everyone gets some sort of a SE, a systems engineer, or an account manager who really looks after things from the vendor side of things, from the OEM side of things. So if you have the equipments purchased from Palo Alto and you are using them in your environment, You can reach out to your SE, you can reach out to your accounts manager, and they would be happy to, hook you up with maybe 3 months, 6 months of evaluation license that you can run in your lab environment.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Beautiful.
Yep.
Excellent. Thanks, man.
Arun, one quick check. You're talking about source NAT, destination NAT, right? Like you'll be showing to configure here, or you'll be explaining the core concepts also from scratch. That's what
I'll explain those. I'll show you how they're configured as well.
Okay. Thank you, Arun. Yeah.
Okay. So again, everything that you see here, that is possible to be done from the lab perspective. We'll be discussing those and we'll be doing the hands-on. Okay. Things like Global Protect, things like Panorama, we'll be still discussing it. I'll still go over things with respect to those features, but you won't be able to do hands-on for them. Okay, for which you will be provided the videos which you can go through.
So for Global Protect, like this is the VPN thing, right? Global Protect is
remote access VPN.
Yes. Yeah. So we don't get access for that, but we can discuss it theoretically, correct?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So site-to-site VPN works.
Okay.
You can still do site-to-site VPN. Just the Global Protect piece, you won't be able to do things like configuring the Global Protect portal or the gateway, download the Global Protect application, and test the remote access VPN from a client. So this is something that you won't be able to do.
Okay, got it. Yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, one more quick question, just to confirm whether you were aware about it. Is this called networking's offering any specific course for Panorama?
I don't really have an answer for that. Gaurav, could you please?
Yeah, so we have Panorama also. So basically what happened, we are delivering Palo Alto 2 batches, one with license and one is without licensing. With license is always expensive. Like we are delivering twice in a year this with Panorama. So whenever you need, I'll give you access to that particular batch so that you're able to clear your doubts later to the Panorama there.
Okay. So, and then you said it's twice in a year, yeah?
Yeah, it's twice a year because see, I'll tell you that generally people are paying 25,000 rupees for the Palo Alto training for this training. Okay. When I'm talking about including the licensing, the cost goes to 80,000 rupees. The same course.
How much is that? Sorry, 60,000?
60 to 80,000 rupees.
Okay, fair enough.
Because
Okay.
we supposed to take a spot from Palo Alto directly and you're getting a licensed lab. It's a real physical devices access you're getting.
Right. Okay. Got my answer. Thank you. Thanks.
So Gaurav, if you want to opt for that, we can, right? Like.
Yes. If somebody is interested to do that, you can.
Okay. Thank you.
Palo Alto course కోసం చెప్తున్నాడు.
Sorry?
ఇప్పుడే వచ్చావా?
Can't understand you. Sorry. Could
you
repeat that?
Hey, Hemant, can you mute yourself?
All right. Any other questions, anyone?
One more quick question, actually. So this course will cover up the PCNSE and PCNSA, both courses, if I'm not wrong.
For the most part, yes. Again,
when you say
minus
most part, how much percentage you're talking about?
Like I said, the Panorama is, no hands-on plus the Global Protect. No hands-on.
You said whatever teaching material you're going to provide is going to be good enough to sit for the exam.
Right. But again, if you are, really after having that hands-on kind of a thing, yes, you would miss that. But then again, from a content perspective, yes, you will have everything to go up to PCNSE. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you.
Guys, I shared one link where you can see the official Palo Alto lab cost. That's directly like they are official partner for Palo Alto, so you can buy out there also. Or if you want to deliver that official batch, we can take it from here and we can deliver for you guys. If anybody is interested, that's additional.
Question for you, Gaurav. Is that so do you run the course like when you have handful of people ready, or you just offer for individual? How it works?
We have both, sir, group as well as individual.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone?
I think we're good to go ahead.
Oh, okay. So that's that. And I think we could start with a little bit of introduction. And for the most part, the way that I deliver sessions is I typically use whiteboard only. Okay. So in very limited scenarios, I would use some sort of a slide deck. Okay. So it's mostly going to be just whiteboarding. Okay. And I hope everyone can see the board really. Okay. So we'll begin with our introduction. So before we go into the firewall side of things, before we go into talking about the nitty-gritties of firewall really, okay, I really would want you to understand what cybersecurity is really. How does it differ from something like information security? You must have heard the term InfoSec, okay? Plus some of the other terms, what assets are, what exploits are, what threats are, vulnerabilities, what are the different sorts of threats, okay, different types of viruses, malicious traffic, etc. And then we'll start discussing the firewall piece. We'll start with discussing how the firewalls have evolved and then move into the Palo Alto side, okay? So this weekend, we'll keep things light. We'll just do some introductions, etc. Okay, just to get things going, okay? And for now, I'm just using this board, but I would probably ask everyone to, not touch the board, because right now everyone will have kind of like a collaborator access. Okay, so if you do anything, it will kind of write it on the board for everyone. Okay, so just refrain from doing anything on that board. Okay. Okay, so cybersecurity, right? So obviously, as all of us are aware, we kind of live in an interconnected world nowadays, okay, where we have, or any sort of actions that you take, okay, both at an individual level, at an organization level, okay, can basically cause a lot of harm as well. Okay, so the real objective of cybersecurity is to protect us as users, as individuals, any sort of critical infrastructure that we might have, okay, could be your personal laptop, could be a personal mobile device, could be the economy, country as well, from any sort of harm that might result in some sort of a compromise, some sort of a destruction of data, devices, etc. And when we say cybersecurity risk, okay, it includes not only the risk of some sort of a data theft or data breach, but also the risk of an entire organization being crippled down the level where they cannot operate properly. Okay, the devices going down a lot. Right from the start of the COVID up until now, we have seen an increase in these cybersecurity threats. Okay, cybersecurity attacks that have happened. I'm pretty sure everyone would have heard the term ransomware attacks. data breaches that have happened, data being stolen, okay, or Meta or Facebook went through that as well, okay, where the user data was stolen by someone out on the internet, okay. So cybersecurity is really, or a cybersecurity program is very, very crucial nowadays for any organization, really, okay. And cybersecurity can no longer be something that you can just position or just put on to an IT team. Okay, every individual, right, in the organization or even at home. Okay, even when you are, maybe accessing internet in the airport lounge or maybe in the hotel, everyone needs to be involved to protect their data, to protect the devices, to protect the environment, to protect the infrastructure. Okay, now a lot of times individuals confuse information security with cybersecurity. Okay, so in the past, a lot of information security programs and policies were designed to protect the individual, the data, the devices. Okay, that used to be InfoSec, or that used to be information security. Okay, and this used to primarily be confined to within an organization. Okay, so now no longer this is sufficient, because especially after COVID, after the pandemic, not everyone is working from office now. We have a hybrid environment, right? We have people working from home. There is remote workforce. So now we cannot implement policies and programs from a security perspective to just rely on an organization only. Okay, so nowadays organizations are not self-contained. Okay, organizations are doing cloud-based traffic. They're implementing they're implementing applications, devices in the cloud. There are users accessing those applications from their home. There are users accessing those applications from the organization when they are working from office. So the organizations are now not self-contained. Okay, and there's a price behind having this sort of an interconnected environment where there are applications everywhere now. Okay, not just on-prem in the local data center, which it used to be previously. Okay, so this has also increased the exposure for attacks, right? So every organization nowadays, regardless of how big that organization is, how small that organization is, or where it's located in the world, everyone is now a potential attack, or sorry, a potential target really for an attack. Okay, and this is where the cybersecurity aspect comes in, and this is how the cybersecurity differs from InfoSec. Okay, because the cybersecurity really now is the process wherein we are trying to protect information by preventing, detecting, and responding to attacks. Okay, so before the attack can happen, we try to do something on the network so that we can prevent the attack from taking place in the first place. If something still goes ahead, there is some sort of an attack, then how does the network detect it? And how do you respond to it? How do you fix that? How do you come out of that attack? Okay, so this is what makes up for cybersecurity now. So cybersecurity programs now recognize that organizations must be vigilant, they must be resilient, the networks must be resilient, and they must be ready to protect and defend any traffic that is coming in and leaving the organization, leaving the network. Plus, any organizational data, how it is stored, how it is transmitted, how it is processed. Okay, so all of this now makes up your cybersecurity. And again, it's no longer just confined to the on-prem applications. And that's really going to be the difference between cybersecurity and InfoSec. Okay, so cybersecurity now does everything that InfoSec used to do. Okay, plus some more. Okay, so there are different standards, there are different compliance regulations, models that have been devised. Okay, and I would want you guys to go ahead and read some of these information. Okay, so that it can give you much better insight into. Obviously, you cannot learn the frameworks, okay, but you can at least read some information about them. For example, there is NIST framework, National Institute of Standards and Technology. Okay, it's a well-known organization that is part of US Department of Commerce. Okay, so NIST is basically a non-regulatory federal agency within US, and NIST basically gives guidance. They publish documents, okay, wherein they share best practices on what an organization should do to protect themselves from cybersecurity attacks. Okay, and NIST framework is a very common framework that basically is utilized. Okay, then you have ISO, International Organization for Standardization. Okay, this is mostly in the European Union. This is mostly the US. Okay, then there are some other standards that have been developed based upon industry. So for example, if we are in healthcare, in hospitals, clinics, right? How do you protect the patient records? How do you protect doctors' records? Okay, so that is something that is defined by HIPAA. Okay, that's the name of the standard, really. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Okay, it sets standards for protecting the privacy and security of patient health information. We call this PHI, Patient Health Information. Okay, then if we talk about financial institutions, banks, e-commerce, anywhere there is financial transactions that are being handled by any organization, there are standards that have been defined through PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Okay, so this sets rules and guidelines which have been designed to help organizations that handle credit card information, so that the credit card information can be kept safe and secure. And these are some of the more common ones. Okay, there is another one in Europe. It's called GDPR. Okay, it's one of the more stricter norms in the European Union, General Data Protection Regulation. Okay, so if you're doing business, if you have a website, if you have any sort of a data collection environment in any country in Europe, you need to follow GDPR. You need to make sure that you properly collect and process any sort of personal individual data. This is PII. Okay, things like name, date of birth, address, contact number, gender or sex, etc., etc. So all of this information qualifies as PII. Okay, so organizations in European Union need to follow GDPR guidelines to protect this data from any sort of data breaches, etc., etc. Okay, and there are some others as well. We have GLBA, SOX. Okay, again, mostly US focused. Okay, protect the privacy and security of consumer financial data held by financial institutions, again, in the US. So these are some of the standards that have been designed, have been developed, which kind of gives guideline for organizations that are trying to, consume and have all of this data. Okay, so these are some of the cybersecurity frameworks or regulations that are used in organizations, really. Okay, so again, I would encourage everyone to, especially the folks who are new to the security side of things, okay, start off with reading about what GDPR is, okay, what PII is, how does it differ from PHI, okay, what HIPAA is, PCI DSS. These are actually going to be very helpful in you understanding what are you trying to protect. Okay, so when I say firewall, that is okay, right? We are trying to implement firewall. But why are we implementing firewall? What's the need for implementing firewall? What are we trying to protect, really? Okay, and if a firewall is deployed in a certain way, or if certain policies are implemented, so why are those policies being implemented, really? Okay, so you should really know the reason. You should always know the why behind it. It will help you understand the technology much better. Okay, so that's why security is very different than just your regular routing and switching. Okay, you do routing and switching because you want to have network connectivity, network reachability. That's really it, right? Why do you protect the data? Why do you create some policies in the firewall? Okay, how do you deploy a firewall, right? Whether you place it on the network edge, whether you place it in the core of the network, whether you place it at the edge of the data center, or maybe in the core of the data center. Why do you implement one versus the other? Okay, what are you trying to achieve? What is the organization going to get out of it? Okay, so with security, you have to understand these whys as well. Okay, and again, it will be very helpful for you to, or it will be very helpful in the long run. Okay, so again, for folks who are just starting with security, great, this is going to give you a good foundation. Plus, when you go into additional products, additional solutions, okay, maybe from firewalls, you now go into implementing AAA or Radius server, or so an individual here has experience with ICE, MAP, .1x, etc. Okay, so there you would have a completely different mindset and a completely different use case of why you also need something like a AAA server when you already have a firewall. Why do you need it? What's the use case for it? Okay. So I always encourage folks, especially who are new to security, to understand the why behind it. Okay. You will get good with configuration. You will be able to do the configuration, etc. But you should understand the why. All right. And again, anytime anyone has any question, please feel free to interrupt, unmute yourself, and ask the question. Okay. Very helpful if we keep the sessions interactive, really.
I have a quick question actually regarding
Yes.
these things. There's a course called ISO 27001.
Mm-hmm.
Does this course actually covers of all the what is called the framework that you just mentioned here?
So this course is being provided by Networkings.
ISO. Yeah, so the course is called ISO 27001.
Correct. Right. So
my question is, how much does it cover? Like GDPR, NIST, HIPAA, is it all part of that course? Or?
So no. So all of these are individual frameworks. Okay.
Yes.
ISO is basically it's a group of standards, or I should say international standards that have been developed.
Correct.
Okay. And it's really, so I have written here EU, but it really is applicable across, if I remember correctly, across 160 countries.
That is correct.
Right. So ISO, basically it has 6 documents. There is 27001, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Correct.
Okay. And all of them, they cover different things. The 2000 or the 27001 that you're talking about, it actually talks about ISMS.
Yes.
Information Security Management System.
Methodology.
So
yeah,
so it's that specification. So that course that you have, it will have you go through what is ISMS, what goes into implementing ISMS, best practices around ISMS.
Okay.
In an environment. Okay, in an organization or from an organization perspective. Okay, so if your goal is to anytime in the future go ahead and get yourself the 20001 certification for yourself, and then maybe have some path if you want to become a lead auditor.
GRC, when you're talking about, yeah.
Right. So for the 27001, so it's going to be very helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. Thank you.
All right. So talking about all these frameworks and everything, why do we need them, right? Why do we need cybersecurity, or why did we need something like InfoSec? Okay. The primary reason for having any of this or having any of these discussions is really to do CIA. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, so we typically say that whenever you're trying to implement a solution, a security solution, we are trying to protect the CIA. We're trying to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. Okay, so confidentiality. So again, I'll just quickly go over each of these and they will make much more sense. Confidentiality is really privacy. Making sure that my data is private. Okay, so if I have, let's say if I'm trying to do some sort of a banking transaction, or if I'm trying to do a net banking service against my bank, the traffic that I'm sending back and forth against the banking website, right? I'm entering my credit card number, I'm viewing my statement, I'm viewing my account balance, I may be viewing information about any sort of loans or mortgages that I might have. Okay, I want all of that data to remain confidential. I should be the only one that should be able to view that data. No one else on the internet should be able to view that data or see that data as well. Okay, so that information is private for me. So only myself and the bank knows about that information, and that should always remain that way. That's my confidentiality. And how does that confidentiality really come into picture? We do TLS, right? We have HTTPS communication from my browser to the banking website. So we are building that secure tunnel using TLS, and then we send HTTP traffic through that tunnel. That's when it becomes HTTPS. Okay, so that traffic is being encrypted. Okay, so encryption is how you achieve confidentiality. Okay, so anytime you have to do any sort of confidential traffic, confidential information, you encrypt that data. Okay, so later on when we'll discuss IPsec, etc., that's when I'll discuss more about how encryption really works, the different sort of algorithms that go into encryption. Okay, so some of the algorithms, protocols I'm writing already here. Okay, just to give you kind of like a head start about things. Okay, that's the confidentiality piece. That's one of the goals behind cybersecurity. Also, one of the goals behind having a firewall or any other security product. I want to keep my data confidential. Okay, and this was just an example from for your personal access perspective. If you talk about from an organization perspective, there are lots of data that can be sent and received from the internet while you are on-prem, or maybe you're trying to access an application hosted by your organization in the cloud, and you want to keep that data confidential. No one else should be able to get that information. Okay, so we typically do encryption. Okay, and encryption could be either for traffic that is being transmitted, or when it's being stored on something like a disk, right? A lot of organizations, when they give a work laptop or a workstation, right? A lot of times they require that the drives be encrypted. From Windows perspective, they are typically BitLocker encrypted. Okay. The reason for that is to keep the data confidential. If, for example, your work device gets stolen or it gets lost, no one should be able to extract the data from that hard drive. And the only way to ensure that is if that drive is encrypted, if that data is encrypted. Okay, so that's an example of confidentiality of data at rest. Okay, versus the previous example when I gave for the net banking, that is an example of confidentiality or encryption for data in transit or data while it's being transmitted. Another example is VPN. Okay, so that's that C. That's one of the goals behind cybersecurity. The next one is integrity. Okay, integrity makes sure that the data, while it is being transmitted or when it is being sent from A to B, no one in the middle should be able to change the data. Okay, the data, how it was compiled or how it was created at A, when it was transmitted to B, and when B receives it, there should be no changes in the data. The data should be as it is. That's integrity. Okay, so I'm pretty sure everyone would have at some point in time downloaded some sort of a ISO file, some sort of an application from a vendor, maybe from Palo Alto website, from maybe Fortinet, from maybe Sophos, HP, Brocade, maybe Juniper, maybe Cisco. Okay, any sort of software, maybe a device upgrade file, deployment file, etc., etc. Right? A lot of times, a lot of these vendors, they give a SHA value. Okay, so when you download the file, you compare the SHA value against the downloaded file. Okay, So the reason for providing this SHA value here is when you download this file to your desktop, okay, you calculate the SHA value using some sort of a tool, okay, using maybe a Linux machine, etc. There are Windows-based tools as well, okay, through which you get a value. Maybe let's say I get a value of AB. The vendor has also calculated a value using the tool. That's stored on their server. Now, when you have downloaded this file, you calculate the value, and then you compare these values with what the vendor has on their server. If both of them match, then it basically means that the integrity of the data has not been compromised, that the data integrity is in place. It means that no changes have been done while this file was being downloaded. If, however, there is a mismatch in these values, then it basically means that the file that you downloaded does not match the file that was at the source. Okay. Or someone did some changes to that file, or maybe you downloaded the file from a completely different source. Okay, so if even a single byte, or I would say just a bit, okay, even a single bit is changed in a file, that will change the SHA value completely. Okay, so integrity is where we want to ensure that how I am creating my data, and when I send that data to some XYZ person, that XYZ person receives that data in its original form. There should have been no changes done while that data was being transferred or transmitted. Okay, so that's another goal behind cybersecurity, to maintain the integrity of the data. And lastly is the availability. I need to ensure that my users have access to their data. And it could be something as simple as going back to our example of that banking website, right? So I would expect my bank to have sufficient availability for their servers, etc., so that I can access the server and my data anytime that I want. I don't want my banking servers to go down 20 days in a month, right, where I'm not able to access their servers. I'm not able to do any transactions. I'm not able to view any of the information with respect to my banking account, really. Okay, so another goal behind cybersecurity is to ensure that there is availability of data, availability of services. Okay, a lot of times WhatsApp servers go down for whatever reason, right? So there is a lack of availability at that point in time with respect to WhatsApp, or maybe Facebook, or maybe YouTube, for example. All of these are services. Okay, if Gmail goes down, I cannot access my emails. That's my data that I'm not able to access. Okay, so these vendors, these brands, I should say, they also make sure that their services, the user data that they're hosting, is available always. Okay, so that's another goal behind cybersecurity, to protect the devices against any sort of attacks which can affect the availability. For example, any sort of DOS attacks, denial of service attacks, okay, where an attacker could send millions of packets in a couple of seconds to server, whereby, hammering that server and taking down those servers, causing them to reboot, etc., which can affect availability. All right, makes sense. Any questions with respect to CIA? One of the very crucial goals behind cybersecurity Okay, so if someone anytime asks you, why do you need cybersecurity? A very simple answer is to protect CIA. Okay, and you should now be able to explain to someone what CIA really is, what it entails, really. Okay. Now, talking about some other things with respect to cybersecurity. Okay. So I'll talk about some additional things, some additional terms, which are going to be very useful when we start discussing, start to configure firewalls, and when you would see some of these terms come up. Okay. One of them is threat. Okay. Or before I talk about threat, asset. Okay. So what is an asset really? Now, an asset is anything that is of a value. Okay, that has a value against it. So you and me, we both are assets. Okay, a router, a server, a switch, a laptop, a hard drive. From a hardware asset perspective, they are all assets because they have some sort of an economic value because they are owned by, could be an individual or could be a corporation or could be an organization. If we talk about virtual assets, could be things like databases, Excel sheets. Okay, all of these qualify as assets because they hold value for some organization or for some individual. Okay, so anytime any of these assets are either lost, stolen, damaged, attacked, they come with or there is going to be a cost against them. Okay, now cost could be for the individual, for the organization, or whoever owns that asset. Okay, so anything on the network or anywhere in the world, really, we classify them or we call them out as an asset. Anything that has some sort of a value against it. Now, what is a threat? Threat is anything that poses a danger to the asset. Okay, anything that causes a danger to me, right? A very simple example, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of us drive, right? When you're out on the road, when you're trying to drive, in my opinion, everything is a threat, right? Anyone could cause an accident. Okay, so everyone is a threat. Okay, because anything and everything on the road while I'm driving poses a danger to me and to my vehicle, really, to my asset. Okay, so if there is someone who is trying to actively access something, who's trying to actively attack your asset, and is able to successfully attack your asset, is able to cause a reboot, a restart, is able to steal your device, steal your asset, we call that as the threat being realized. Okay. If I could spell realized correctly. Okay, again, if someone is actively launching an attack against an asset, is able to successfully attack the asset, steal it, damage it, etc., we call this as a threat being realized. Okay, so the entire or someone can take advantage of a weakness in the asset. Okay, if I left my car unlocked, for example, that is a weakness of the asset. Okay, that I just introduced by leaving my car unlocked. Okay, if I leave some sort of a laptop in plain view inside of my car, that is again some sort of a weakness that I have introduced. Okay, so an attacker is looking for this weakness in the asset. We call this vulnerability. Okay, so a vulnerability is a weakness in the asset's design, implementation. It could be software, it could be a code, etc. Mohammed, we typically will do breaks, okay? But since these first two classes this weekend are just 1.5 hours long, that's why I didn't break, okay? So from next weekend, we will have longer classes. So I'll typically try and break every hour, okay? So we typically will do 2.5 hour classes from next weekend, okay? So after every hour, I'll probably give a 10-minute break, all right?
Thank you.
And since it's just 10 minutes left before I wind up, I just wanted to talk about some of the things, okay, rather than going into a break, all right? Okay, so continuing with the vulnerability. So again, vulnerability is a weakness in a design, implementation, in a software, in a code, okay? And if an attacker is able to make use of that vulnerability, make use of that weakness, it can realize that threat. Okay, now these vulnerabilities, these weaknesses, right? So lots of things around us can have weakness. Some of the more real world examples I already mentioned, okay? But from a network perspective, these could be applications. No matter where they are, they could be on mobile device, laptop, workstation, servers, etc. Operating systems could be hardware-based weaknesses or vulnerabilities. Could be any sort of misconfiguration. Okay, a very common misconfiguration that a lot of people do in, let's say, home networks or home environments, right? Everyone has wireless at home, right? People leave default passwords on their access points. That is a misconfiguration. That is a weakness. That is a vulnerability in your home network. Okay, and very common in enterprise, in corporate implementations, real world implementations as well, not just home. Okay. So these are the places where you could have vulnerabilities in a network. Okay, and if any attacker, again, can make use of these vulnerabilities, can figure out these vulnerabilities, they can attack and realize the attack, compromise the device, steal, take control of their devices. Okay, and that's when they become a threat. Okay, now there is obviously a word for it as well. So when there is a vulnerability, an attacker can make use of that vulnerability, make use of that weakness. That is basically called as an exploit. Okay, and an exploit is nothing but it could be a technique, a tool, a process that an attacker can use to take advantage of a weakness or a vulnerability and damage, take access, steal the asset. Okay, so again, coming back to that real world example of my car unlocked, that is a vulnerability that I have introduced. Okay, now someone could use, or maybe even if I didn't unlocked, I could have left my cell phone or a laptop in clear view, right? Now someone could make use of a tool to break the glass, or maybe pick the lock and steal my asset, right? So the act of picking the lock or breaking the glass, that's an exploit. Okay, someone is taking advantage of the vulnerability. Okay. Now, if I keep my car locked, I park it inside my garage or a protected parking area, I don't leave any valuable equipments into my or in my car, there is no vulnerability. If there is no vulnerability, there cannot be any exploit. If there cannot be any exploit, there is no threat. Okay, so a threat will only be there if my asset has a weakness or my asset has vulnerability. If my asset has no vulnerability, no weakness, then there is no threat. Okay, so always remember that. So that's the correlation between all of these things. Okay, all of these terms, and they will be very helpful when we go into the firewall, understand what it does. A lot of terms, a lot of things that you would see where I would call out things like threat, vulnerability, exploit. So this would give you a view as to what I am really referencing.
Arun, can you please explain that exploit once again, the exploit part?
So exploit could be any piece of software, any piece of tool, any piece of technique, or any process that can take advantage of the weakness, can take advantage of the vulnerability. Okay, that's what we call it an exploit. Okay, now remember, every application that you use, every piece of software you use, any operating system that you use, they always will have some sort of a weakness or a vulnerability. Okay, you cannot have a perfect application. Never. Okay, so the thing with the network is, and that's why there's a need for security products, there's need for security professionals, because we will never have a zero threat. We will never have any assets that will always be without any weakness. Okay, the only thing is about these vulnerabilities, if no one knows about these vulnerabilities, then no one can exploit them. Okay, so if a hacker, if an attacker does not know that an asset has a particular vulnerability or a particular weakness, he won't be able to use any technique to exploit it. Plus, if let's say I developed an application, or if Microsoft realizes that there's a weakness in Windows, they could fix it, right? A lot of times you get updates, you get patches. Okay, the reason for that is that because they had They have realized that there is some vulnerability, some weakness within the operating system, and they have proactively fixed it before some external person is able to figure out that vulnerability and is able to exploit it. Okay, so when no one knows about any existing vulnerabilities, they are basically known as 0-day. Okay, and if no one knows about the vulnerability, and let's say I am able to figure out that vulnerability on my own and I'm able to exploit it, okay, it's known as a 0-day exploit. And why it's called 0-day? Because no one really knew about it. Okay, and that's why 0-day exploits are very dangerous. Okay, because let's say I am able to figure out a vulnerability in Microsoft Windows 11. Right now, Microsoft is the one that developed the operating system. They know all the code and the applications, etc., that go behind the operating system. Okay, so if I'm able to figure out a vulnerability, I can take advantage of it. I can exploit it. Okay, I can steal data from users or from environments or from network that are running Windows 11. And no one will be able to do anything. My firewalls won't be able to do anything. My antivirus devices won't be able to do anything. Anti-spam devices won't be able to do anything. Okay, because they don't know about it. Okay. So again, it's not possible to have a zero threat or a zero vulnerability environment. There always will be some sort of a vulnerability. Our goal as being security engineers, security admins, okay, security architects, whatever we might want to call it, is to make sure that we protect our assets in such a way that unknown, unauthorized people cannot access those assets. Okay, and are not able to figure out vulnerabilities, right? So that's what hackers do. They try to hack into networks by figuring out weaknesses in assets, figuring out vulnerabilities. If they are able to figure out vulnerabilities and there are not sufficient protection mechanisms in place, they are able to penetrate environments and able to steal data or able to spread malware, okay? Be able to spread viruses, be able to do ransomware where you encrypt everything in the environment. Okay. Any questions? Anyone? Hope you get some idea behind why we are trying to do anything with respect to security. Okay. And these concepts really cater to anything with respect to security, not just from a firewall perspective, not just from endpoint security perspective. Okay. But security in general. Why do we need security? Okay, if there are no more questions, then we'll end it here today. Okay, and we'll continue tomorrow. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining in.
Thanks
See you
for it.
tomorrow.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, everyone.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Yes.
Bye.